Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the ET Stand, the Cronulla Sharks fan podcast, where we let our talking do the football. Today we've got another episode of Classic Cronulla Chronicles. This time it's Stephen Franklin's starting debut, because for the 2024 season corresponding round 6, we're playing the South Sydney Rabbitohs at Accor Stadium, and we're going to go back to 2008 for a classic match involving the team that were playing, the South Sydney Rabbitohs, at that same venue. Franko, great to have you with us. What are your memories of '07/early 2008? They were interesting times.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me, Williams. It was interesting times. Obviously, Ricky Stewart's tenure at the Sharks started out with a bit of optimism. 2007 started well, but we got stuck with that unenviable record of losing the most games by 6 points or less. So that was a bit of a heart wrencher and something that the press liked to throw around quite a bit during that off season. Didn't really expect much the following season. Personally, sort of a bit more of the same old. I think was sort of expected a nice gritty competitive team, but probably not going to do too well. And as we now know, the 2008 was a bang up season. We found the way to turn those narrow losses around, and it was a great season. Really enjoyed it. This game seems to be no different. Another close win.
Yeah, well, you're right that we lost I don't know the exact record. We can look that up later, but an awful lot of games by close margin. I think it was 6 points or less in 2007. And then we had a great start to 2008 after. We'll touch on the trials here because it was only round 5, so we've really only got 4 NRL matches to go off for our form. So if you look at the Sharks' form, we were sitting 4th. We started the season with wins over Manly at Brookvale 16-10, over Melbourne in Melbourne 17-16. We had an unfortunate loss against the Gold Coast where we went ahead early, and then it was their second game at their new stadium at Robina. Huge crowd. I was there at that one, and the Gold Coast just ran all over us in the second half. And then a golden point win over the Dragons where it looked very unlikely the week before at Homebush, and it was Bryson Goulden reaming in a Greg Bird grubber, getting those big hands out or big arms out to grab it and put it down the corner. Cavell missed the conversion, unfortunately, but a Jason Rolls penalty in possession gave us a kick from a fair way out, and Cavell duly stood up and took it for a 2-point golden point victory. But looking back at our trial performance, so the previous time we played South was a 44-0 drubbing against us at Gosford, while Souths, they had a follow-up trial game after that one where they beat the Dragons in the Charity Shield 24-20. The Souths had a good end to 2007. They did make the finals, but there was a fair bit of talk around under Jason Taylor, how much better they were going to go, how they were building for a good season. We'll have a look at their lineup in a sec, but they opened the year with losses to the Roosters, the Bulldogs, the Panthers, and Manly, seeing them be 0-4 and 16th, bottom of the table in the 16-team comp. So it was a bit of a matchup, but it was one of those going into it classic game that Sharks were expected to win, but would more than likely lose because of our ability to play other teams into form. Do you remember any of those games leading into it? Obviously, the Manly and Storm games are pretty standout ones.
Oh, I remember that. Obviously, the Storm match was a great work. Yeah, you know what? This was, like I said, 2008 was a great year. We've got the beating Manly round 1, which is a rare feat for us, if I remember correctly. Greg Bird busts over for a try. The Melbourne Storm match was the ambush with the punch on. Great game. Don't quite remember the Titans game, but that St George game, I remember every bit of that one, who I was with, where I was, everything about that game is burned into my brain. I really loved that game. It was an invitation for me to drink a lot that night after that match. It was a great day.
That Dragons game was a classic, and as is, I suppose, good and bad of the era, that Dragons game we'll cover at a later date. The coverage is still available. You can see the highlights on KO and YouTube and but this one, there is nothing at all. So we're very much going off match reports, memory, forums. We'll roll forward to the the teams, but you're right in saying where you can remember where you were, what you're doing. I unfortunately wasn't at that game. I remember it was at a mate's birthday. There was some kind of harbour cruise organised, so we were at a bar in at Darling Harbour, frantically jumping between bar to bar before getting on the boat, going, oh, it's going to Golden Point, and there's no one had kind of live streaming on their phones at any point, like at that stage. So luckily we got to see Golden Point finish quickly. If it didn't, we would have probably been getting on the boat and then relying on just looking up the website later. I don't think even I had a smartphone then, or some kind of Nokia thing, so it would have been interesting. But we'll slide into the team lineups, add a bit of music just for Baldo's pleasure. And the Cronulla Sharks 2008 classic lineup: number 1, Brett Carney; the wingers, Bryson Goodwin, Luke Cavell; the centres, Ben Pomeroy, David Simmons; the halves, Brett Seymour, Brett Morley; the front row, Jacob Selms, Kevin Kingston, Luke Douglas; the back row, Paul Stevenson, Fraser Anderson, Greg Bird; the bench, Adam Peake, Brian Norrie, Isaac De Gois; the coach, Ricky Stewart. While the South Sydney Rabbitohs, you wouldn't say it's a classic lineup, but there are some memorable names in there. So Fatuli Talanoa was the fullback, Nathan Merritt, the former Shark, and Sam Latu, the wingers. The centres, Jermaine Paulson and Bo Champion. The halves, John Sutton, Jeremy Smith. The front row, Manasi Manukafoa, George Nadera and Roy Asatasi. And David Kiddle, who was also co-captain with Roy Asatasi in the back row, along with David Farlongo and Ben Lowe. The bench, Bo Falloon, Dean Witters, former Shark Luke Stewart and Shannon McPherson. The coach, Jason Taylor. Roll forward to... cut on the music. Yeah, any names to go there for you? Any interesting names that...
As you mentioned, the Nathan Merritt, I think, is always one of those funny discussions, because when he was a Shark, he was not really appreciated as a player. I don't think he had the raw speed that everyone knew he had, but I don't think if anyone was sad to see him go, or at least a lot of people weren't sad to see him go. And he proved to be a bit of a champion, right? He went to Souths and racked up the points and had a great career in the end. I'm not going to say it's one of those woulda, coulda, shoulda moments, but it's interesting to sort of see that new lease on life that players get sometimes going to other clubs.
Yeah, well, he started at Souths, came across to us for 2004, 2005. We signed him with Nigel Vangana and a few other players after a poor 2003. Heading into 04, things were looking good. He could always score a try, and you're right, he kicked goals as well, so he racked up plenty of points. He's now a South legend, but yeah, his time with us wasn't as successful as it could have or should have been. I remember I think it was the Tigers game where we got smashed 46-6 at Shark Park when the Tigers were on their way to the grand final, and Nathan Merritt came back into the team there. And I remember Merritt getting a fair bit of stick at the time because Danny Nutley had outran him in chasing a long-range try, and Merritt had given up that. So I'm not sure if it just wasn't a fit for him. Some players are better fit for some clubs or some environments than others, but I think Merritt wouldn't have gone astray in this 08 lineup, probably replacing Goodwin there, but given Cavell provide the goal kicking. But yeah, Merritt, very, very handy player. It was good to see him get that success. A shame he didn't get it with us because, yeah, that stage of his career, if he converted into the South Sydney later career Merritt that he did prove to be, we probably would have hung on to him and it would have been with the Sharks. He had that record as opposed to with South.
It's not like we had standout wingers and centres over that period either. So
no, and you're right. We were a bit skinny in the centres, given that David Simmons, I'd say, is an out-and-out winger, and he was playing in the centres for all of 2008 and some of 2009. So, despite being a solid team that, as we'll see, did make the top, finish equal first, finished third on for and against this Sharks team, was very gritty, very solid, very very defence oriented, but wasn't great at racking up scores, as this game will show. A few interesting ins as well for us. So Jacob Selms at number 8, who only played a handful of games across 07, 08, 09. Remember him having big raps, but didn't really kick on. Not sure why, but it shows how the esteem that Ricky Stewart held him in there with a few injuries that he was in as a starting prop. Paul Stevenson signed midway through 2007. End up being a pretty handy replacement at times. He's starting second row, which is an interesting point given that he was a centre when he started with Manly. And also looking on the bench too, we've got Dustin Cooper, who didn't play too many more games after that, and Isaac De Gois doing the tag team with Kevin Kingston. But the actual match itself, It was a pretty gritty and dour one. As we said, we don't have much by way of records here or footage to go off, but I was there and I do distinctly remember the Sharks dominated early. A good early try to Greg Bird, who ran off Kamali, I think, through a pretty big hole to score. There was an offside penalty. Sharks rolled downfield and took the 2 to go 8-0 up. Shortly after that, from the corresponding restart after taking the 2, the Sharks went the length of the field and Luke Cavell scored in the corner. Unfortunately, he missed the goal. They were up 12-0, but right on halftime, South had a good chunk of possession, about 3 or 4 sets on the Sharks line. The Sharks cracked, and John Sutton scored to make it 12-6 at halftime, which brought the crowd right back into it. And then the second half was a very dour affair. South had a lot of ball. Eventually, they cracked it with Bo Champion scoring to make it 12-10. The kick from Merritt was missed. The notable moment being that the Sharks held their line, and you look at the match reports and they talk about how the Sharks were basically impenetrable. We do see that South didn't really set the world on fire that year, but they had the crowd behind them. They were keen for their first victory, and Sharks repelled them and held on for a gritty win, which, given that how the Sharks started, they probably should have won by a lot more. But also, too, it was one of those classic matches where the Sharks could quite easily have lost by a fair bit, too, with the amount of ball they gave up and field position that they faced. So, yeah, based on the fact that, I suppose, you weren't there or don't remember this one, Dave, any coverage to give to you, Franko? Anything further to add there?
Yeah, no, I don't really want to have a bit of foot in mouth here, so I'll let this go through to the keeper.
Let's go.
Obviously, there's some talking points that are about to come up that I'll certainly have some 2 points for to share. But as it stands, it's a bit of a black hole, this game.
Yeah, well, we'll get onto it. I'll go a bit out of order here, and we'll start in the far right. We'll touch on it first. That our record at Homebush, whatever you want to call it, Stadium Australia, Telstra, ANZ, Accor, is terrible overall, and it's not great against Souths. We'll go into detail shortly, but this is the only win we've had against Souths at Accor, and Souths have been playing there for a fair period now. Obviously, they played at the Sydney Football Stadium back up until they were removed from the competition in the late 90s. They played again for a few years there before. I think it was around 04, 05 they moved out to Homebush. So we don't have a great record there. Hence, we went back looking at wins, and this is the only one we had. So hopefully they change that history this year to give us a bit more to talk about. But it's not.
So I loathe this stadium, Williams. I loathe it. It is the worst stadium to go and watch football at. And hearing that record, that's probably, the little bit of earworm at the back going, that's why you don't like it. But just the transportation, the getting out of there once the game's over, really don't like going there. And I won't say that it was pulling teeth, but when the grand final rolled around, it was like, I really don't. I suppose I have to. So
I used to loathe it, and I still. So it's mixed emotions, right? As a regular NRL venue, we'll go into it now. I suppose we've played 29 games there. We've won 12. We all know we won the one that counted in 2016. Thank goodness for that.
Yeah, boys.
But as a venue, as an NRL regular season venue, you're right. It is horrid. It is a pain to get to. It is out in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, they've got a few extra bars and restaurants now, but it's no good. You're out. It's so stark and sterile, and then you come out of there usually after a loss. And you're like, I've got to get back on the train, or I've got to jump in my car and drive a long way back home. It is a pain. But as a big ground, it's not. You're right. You are a fair way from the action. It's not Suncorp, but also too, thankfully, it's not the old ANZ Stadium in Brisbane where you are genuinely behind a running track and the like. So it could be better. It could be worse though. But also too, as a venue, I've been there obviously for the 2016 grand final. I've been there for Origin matches, Socceroos matches. I wasn't there at the 2005. I'm digressing here, but that playoff World Cup qualifier, penalty shootout victory over Uruguay. I know people that went and they said it was the best atmosphere they've ever experienced a sporting match ever. That's the venue of that. Obviously, at the Sydney Olympics, I went to the gold medal soccer match between Spain and Cameroon won in a penalty shootout, and there was 110,000 people there. That was amazing. Even early on NRL 1999 doubleheaders, seeing 105,000 people there, things like that. That's where it really stands out, and it's hard because I've got such happy memories and fond memories of that place. And taking a 6-year-old there too, who sees it on TV, and sees that we won the grand final, took him to the Anzac round clash against the Bulldogs here last year. And there was only, I think, 15,000 people there, and he loved it. He's like, "Oh, how good is this? This stadium's awesome." And I remember, I suppose, as a kid, you look at it and go, "Oh, it seats 83,000 or 102,000. How good?" But yeah, as an NRL ground, terrible. And then also too, I remember another South match that you weren't there, unfortunately, but Boldo was. I was travelling up from Canberra where I worked, trying to get there. It was a Friday night game. It was raining. Caught in terrible traffic. Couldn't get a park because I think it was a Justin Bieber concert on at the, whatever you call it, Kudos Bank Arena these days next door. Finally get there. 20 minutes into the match, the Sharks are up 12-0. How good's this? And we didn't score another point. Nathan Gardner got injured. I think that was around 2011. And then it all went to poo from there. So you're right. And then had to walk a long way back to the car, stuck in traffic, getting out of there. Yes. Yeah, it's not the best venue. Anyway, so hopefully we change.
People need to really convince me to go to this venue. So, maybe if we turn that record around, we'll get a few more trips.
Yeah. South's tried to get out of it as soon as the new Allianz, New Sydney Football Stadium opened. They're like, "Oh, get us out of this contract." I think even Albanese was getting involved, but they're tied to Homebush. And yeah, between them and the Bulldogs and the Tigers have played some games there too, and even Parramatta while their stadium's being redone. So obviously what do they call it? The Homebush Bay Trust or whoever it is that runs it are obviously keen to get teams there, but it's at the detriment of other fans. Having said that, we'll see maybe some of the Easter clashes they're talking about. This will give away when we're recording this before Easter, but some of the Easter clashes might get some big crowds and justify its existence for regular season matches. But
hearing at the magic behind the curtains there, Williams.
I am. I've just given it all away. But anyway, so we'll maybe we'll have a B-sides or uncut version later. But looking at it, so Captain Greg Bird, named as captain in the absence of Paul Gallen, indicates the standing that he had at the time with Ricky Stewart and with the coaching staff and the club. He only captained 4 matches in total for the team. I do have them here. I'll bring them up. It was a few matches in early 08 and then later on too in Gallen's absence. But given the fact that we've touched on 2009 and how that all went to no good, and Gallen had the captaincy taken off and given to Trent Barrett, and Brett Kamali had captained the side previously to this, the fact that Kamali was fit, Gallen was out, and Greg Bird was given the captaincy. Here we go. He captained rounds 4 against Dragons, round 5 against South, round 6 against the Cowboys, and then he also captained in round 9 against Penrith, which was their first match back at home, where we lost, unfortunately. That was after the new opening of the Monty Porter, or as it was just known as the Southern Stand then, before they renamed it the Monty Porter Stand a few years later. So, do you have any thoughts on Greg Bird as captain? Obviously, this is the season where it all goes astray at the end of the year for him.
Yeah, he reportedly loved the club, loved the Sharks, loved the area. He was reported as going into Ricky Stewart's office, putting his finger down on the table and saying, "I want to be the Sharks captain forevermore. That's my role. I want to be the captain. Anytime the captaincy is up on offer, I want to be considered for it." And apparently that took Ricky Stewart aback a bit, and was really quite impressed with that sort of passion and that drive to commitment to the Sharks. And I think that might be why he started getting some of these gigs, even with Kamali fit and well. We do know that there was a little bit of at least past animosity between Stewart and Kamali. Don't know if any of that played into it, but certainly there were reports of Bird putting his name in the ring and saying, "I want to be captain when it's available," because he saw himself as a long-term Sharks legend. I think he also said, I'm going to get a bronze statue out the front of Shark Park at one stage. He was really in it for the long haul, and I think that this 2008 season, obviously predating the last few rounds, really showed sort of his commitment to the club. There, he was doing everything right. He was really driving the standards there at the club as well. So it makes sense that he got the captaincy a few times.
Yeah, you're right. I completely forgot about that. I suppose the history between Kamali and Stewart, and then I think that even stemmed back to the 2005 Game 1 Origin game where Ricky Stewart had nothing to do with the Sharks at the time, because the New South Wales coach had thrown Brett Camorley in, and things didn't go well with the intercept pass to Matt Bowen, exactly. And even I think there was an injury, maybe even to Craig Fitzgibbon in that match, and they needed a replacement goal kicker. And Noddy ended up taking the kick and missing, and Ricky Stewart, I remember being, I think, very critical about Noddy's kicking there. And also, too, I remember hearing Brett Camorley interviewed a lot long after that period, where I think that team we didn't have Andrew Johns because obviously he was out injured because Camorley was playing, but there was another noted goal kicker in the team too, and both, I can't remember who it was Fitzgibbon and someone else were off the field, and Brett Camorley didn't know it had gone to him. He was actually looking for whoever the backup kicker was. They said, "No, you're it." Ricky Stewart saw that as a failure to stand up when and show leadership, show initiative, when actually
halfback owns the results, as Ricky Stewart's favourite mantra.
Exactly. Well, he's a halfback, and he was the greatest critic of every other halfback that's played under him, I think. So you're right, that plays into it, but also too, to not taking anything away from Greg Bird. This was peak Greg Bird in his Sharks career. He played Game 3 2007, and him and Gallen had formed the Game 3 Origin 2007 had formed the Blues Bash Brothers tagline, and then played Game 1 of 2008, and I believe Greg Bird got man of the match, and New South Wales won that match. Obviously, they didn't win the series, but Bird was performing exceptionally well. I didn't know that story about him going in and showing that pride and passion, but that doesn't surprise me in the slightest. He'd been playing for a period of time there. He started in 2002, so we're talking about his 6th season there in 2008, and he was probably only 24 or so, given he made his debut at 18, or maybe even 17. So, it was great to see. It's a shame it didn't carry on. Obviously, we won't touch on the allegations there that happened later in the year. That's for another day. But he went on to play for Catalans in France, and I think captain over there, came back and played an awful lot of games for the Titans, and was exceptionally talented there as well, and provided a lot for that team, and also captained them for quite a number of games. So that was Greg Bird. That was him as captain of the Sharks. Rolling forward to another great player who only played for a short period for the Sharks was Kevin Kingston. He was an early favourite of mine when he came in 2005. We're talking offline beforehand that he was a Newtown signed player, so he was playing for before we got Newtown back a few years ago as a reserve grade team. Newtown was the reserve grade team in 2005. He was signed and owned by Newtown, I suppose. The Sharks had to do some wheeling and dealing to bring him into first grade late in the 2005 season to replace, I can't remember who the hooker was that we replaced, but he played 8 matches there and scored a try in his first year, followed up with a huge 2006 playing 23 matches and scoring 2 tries. 2007 he played another 22 matches, scored a try, and then 2008 he had a good start to the year. We had a bit of an oversupply of hookers that period because we had both Kingston, Isaac DeGois on the bench, and Terence CSC coming through as well, who'd been signed from the Warriors. And Kingston ended up getting a season-ending injury and then departed to Parramatta the following year. So what are your thoughts on Kevin Kingston there?
Yeah, Kevin Kingston's one of those interesting players where probably doesn't get the recognition he deserved. Was a solid player, tried really hard, but wasn't flashy, was a little bit vanilla, didn't really get the stats or the highlights reel that brings people to the forefront. And I think another, similar to what we sort of mentioned about Nathan Merritt, with the DeGois and CSCU both having flashy darts and good slick passing, that they sort of took a bit of the forefront of the fans' imagination, and I think some people were pretty happy to see Kevin Kingston leave, which is a bit unfortunate because, as I said, he did a lot of the tough stuff that the club probably needed, was probably the cornerstone of the defence that we were known for in 2008. Not that DeGois wasn't a good defender, but it was certainly something that Kingston showed that he still had a lot of football left into him, given his career after leaving the Sharks.
Yeah, you're right. Kingston was much more of a workhorse or an old school roll up the sleeves kind of hooker that just gave good service head dummy half, but wasn't flashy at all. Although I do remember him distinctly setting up a try for. I've spoken to you about him before. One of those one match legends for this club, Toshio Lassini in 2006, who scored on debut. and never played again for the Sharks in a loss to the Tigers at home. And Kevin Kingston did a dart out of dummy half, ran about 30 metres and drew the fullback and gave it on. So he had the odd dart out of dummy half in him, but you're right. I remember the talk at the time. He had De Gois and CUCU that were, hey, it was a pretty rigid style attack that weren't getting many points. Hey, do we need a point of difference there at hooker? And unfortunately, Kingston, bore the brunt of that. But gee, he was solid. You're right, defensively added a lot. And then the following year for Parramatta, played 19 matches, again scored 2 tries, but played all the way through the grand final in their loss to Melbourne. And looking at his overall stats, Kevin Kingston played 183 matches. He then went on to a decent stint with Penrith where he played the most games of any club over his career, 105 matches, 18 tries. So where he played 59 for Cronulla and 19 for Parramatta. I remember you saying just before we started that there was Parramatta tried to keep Kevin Kingston, but they got knocked on the head.
Yeah, that was one of the first that I can recall anyway, first times where the players as a group have come out and said, we'll all take pay cuts to get under the salary cap so that we can keep a player. And this scenario being Kevin Kingston. And there was a little bit of uncertainty around, can you do that? Is that something they can do? Surely they can do that if they want to take less and keep a player, where the NRL had to sort of come out and say, actually, no, you can't really do that. You've signed agreements, you're due and owed a certain amount, and you're valued at a certain amount. So if that was the case, there'd be a whole lot of shenanigans moving forward. So no, sorry, Kevin Kingston, you got to go.
I'm sure not to throw any shade at the Roosters here, but I'm sure if the Roosters were involved, they would have found a way. But yeah, Kevin Kingston ended up moving on to Penrith there and had a very good end to his career there, and a really solid career given that he, I believe, started later in life, as in he played a fair bit of reserve grade, but he was one of your older debutants there. But
he forged a really good relationship with the Penrith players too, I believe.
Yeah.
So well liked at Parramatta, well liked at Penrith. So he obviously is a good clubman wherever he's been.
Yeah, so he made his debut at 22. So not the youngest, not the oldest, but compared to your players that come through and make their debuts at 18, to still score 180, play 180 first grade matches is something to take out of too. When I know that there was a lot of raps coming out of those that follow Newtown in reserve grade, and Newtown were almost disappointed to see him go because he was adding so much to their season in the New South Wales Cup, or the Premier League, I think it was known as then. But moving forward to Jacob Selms, it was a player who was signed with pretty big raps from up the coast. He was from the Port Macquarie area, then the Hunter area, so played for the Port Macquarie Sharks in his juniors. Played a total of 18 matches for the Sharks across 2007 to 2009, 10 in 2007, 3 in 08, and 5 in 2009. I'm not sure if 2008 was injury affected, but I remember him starting in 2007 being very solid off the bench. Didn't score any tries for us, but was already always dependable. Did get in a few bust-ups at training, but at this point in time, it was a testament to, I suppose, he's standing with Ricky Stewart, that he had him at starting prop over Adam Peake and Brian Norrie, who were on the bench. Looking at it, we did have a few outs from the following week. So Lance Thompson and Missy Talapaupa were both out through injury from the previous week against the Dragons. And we were also missing a few players such as Paul Gallen as well, as already mentioned. So do you have any memories of Jacob Selms?
Yeah, I don't. I remember, you touched on it, I remember him coming in with a lot of raps and a lot of excitement about how good this kid could be. But really just don't remember him stamping any authority or doing anything above and beyond what we also had around that team at the time. You know, there were a lot of headline names at the club, especially in the engine room, getting a lot of kudos, and yeah, Jacob Selms just sort of drifted in and out between them all.
Yeah, you're right. He didn't quite, I suppose. Yeah, it'd be difficult too to stamp his name on it. You're in that forward pack with the players that they had. And I'm just looking forward to at following weeks as well. So we had, so Adam Peake had replaced him the following week. We had Luke Douglas, who debuted in 06 and was really kicking on at that point in time. But you had Lance Thompson in there, who did a bit of front row action as well with, you got Fraser Anderson, Greg Bird, and Gallen in the back row.
Lance Thompson, who won some hearts, right?
Lance Thompson.
That was the
Yep.
ex-Dragon.
Danny Nutley as well. Danny Nutley came onto the team list a few weeks later, so he, I think, was signed mid-season or early season. He didn't start the year with us, but re-signing Danny Nutley provided a lot, and unfortunately Jacob Selms was probably a victim of that depth that we had in the pack and in both the front and the back row. He was definitely in front row only. He wasn't a back row at all. But I remember the wraps he had on early and didn't kick on. It was just interesting to see. I haven't actually done the stats on how many starting games he had, but that was a game which he started, which was pretty rare. So that was Jacob Selms. Moving on, this is one that I suppose I covered for you and touched on maybe briefly before. We'll go into it. So the hugely controversial thing out of this match that provided, I suppose, the most news reports that we could go off was in the 57th minute after Bo Champion scored to bring it back to 12-10, Jason Taylor was on the sideline and got the entire Souths team into a huddle after the kick had been taken. So Sharks were back ready to take the kick off, and Souths were on the sideline with their members behind them, crowd going crazy. Here we go, we're going to win, we're coming back. And Jason Taylor addressed them for a solid 2 or 3 minutes, like an American sport timeout, if you were going to call it that. I remember the media attention at the time was lapping it up. You look at all the Fox coverage. I'm sure Gould was probably getting involved too, going, how good's that? This is great for our sport. I remember being at the game, us blowing up, going, what's going on here? Surely that's not illegal. Surely that's not legal. And lo and behold, it wasn't legal, and Souths were going to get fined for it. But the fact that they lost, the NRL just let them off with a slap on the wrist. But I maybe my blue, black and white coloured glasses on, but I was very much against it because, and some other commentators had said this too, hang on a sec, if we bring this into our game, all of a sudden it's going to take us 20 minutes to do the last 2 minutes while every team has a timeout, and all effect gets taken out of it. It's just a tactic. It was a terrible look, but also too, Souths were under the pump. Jason Taylor was trying anything. Taylor, I think, pled ignorance afterwards, saying, oh, I didn't know that wasn't illegal at all. Obviously, you're going to try and push that boundary, find the line, and they certainly did find it. But yeah, it was interesting being there live, going, and the crowd was. That's one thing about a core ANZ, whatever it's called these days, is that you can get a bit of an echo there. It can be a real cavern, but and real kind of hollow atmosphere. But at that occasion, it wasn't a big crowd. I think it was only about 15,000 again, but they were, or 12,988 here. But the South fans were going crazy. There was a real echo getting around the ground, and they were up for it. And South had plenty of ball and didn't convert. Sharks repelled them. Do you remember this at all, or do you have any thoughts? I know you've seen some American sports and you got experience with that.
I do remember this, and you know what? I didn't have as much of a problem as you did. It was certainly a talking point. I feel that obviously no timeout. Let's just say that we won't have any timeouts. But if you've got the urgency, after a try is scored, to gather the troops at the sideline and just have a bark, I don't see a problem with that. We all know that they talk to the players by proxy already anyway. So you've got the headsets, you've got the remote, the radios. You radio down to the yellow shirt, and he runs on and passes an instruction. So you even have good old Johnny Lang and Ricky Stewart sitting on the sideline instead of up in the box more often than not. I think if you can fit it in the time, and if it can almost become a tactic, if the other team sets up for the kick and they kick off and you guys are still running out of your huddle and you're not ready, well then that's on you. I don't really see a problem with it. I think it certainly has a problem of a slippery slope scenario where as soon as someone does get dirty by it, that it'll cause all sorts of issues and potential rule changes. So I'm happy that it's not there, but I've got nothing against it. Now, I don't know if that's because I'm a little bit biased in that I like Taylor. I think I might be losing some credibility here, but I like Taylor, and I think he brought some good ideas to coaching.
I do agree that Taylor has got a bad rap over his career. And I think this is a side point, but I heard someone, I can't remember who it was, had said that probably what counts against him is he's got a bit of a like people talk about people having resting bitch faces. He's got a bit of a resting scowl face. Looks like a bit of a, as someone else has said, not me, but a punchable face. It probably counts against him. Whereas David Fa'alongo in an off-season kind of drinking session, I think it was Mad Monday, may have found that as well. But you're right. I think Jason Taylor has a lot to give and did provide a lot. And he's still, I'm not sure, I saw him recently. He's assistant coach somewhere.
He's assistant at the Roosters, I think, isn't he?
Yeah. So if Trent Robinson holds him in that esteem, then he must be onto something. So, and obviously he coached Parramatta as well. And did he coach anyone else in his time? But he did get around the first grade coaching bandwagon for all of the revolving door that is the first grade coach.
Obviously, yeah. So I think he was at the Roosters as an assistant coach. Then went to the Bunnies. Was poached to go to the Bunnies as the hot new coach.
Yes.
He coached them. Obviously, that didn't go as well as he could, but it wasn't a great team. Let's be real. They were still in their rebuilding phase of the Russell Crowe era beginning. So they sort of threw a lot of money at the team, but still a lot of rebuilding to be done there. And then and I think we know that a rebuilding coach is probably different to a coach that can fine tune. And so he then went to not directly, but then was at Parramatta, as you said. Again, and not a great team, needed a lot of work, needed a lot of rebuilding. Obviously, it's taken a decade for Parramatta to dig themselves out of the hole they were in, so it wasn't really something that Taylor could potentially be responsible for. So he had a couple of bad teams that he was head of. You go look at him, I think he won the New South Wales Cup last year as coach with the Bears, I think. And then got brought back to the Roosters. So he obviously has an eye for it. Just needs to be in that right team, in that right structure.
Yeah, he also coached the Tigers between 2015 and 2017.
That's
and
right.
You're right that he coached the Bears to a premiership win in 2023, and he's coached them. I mean, obviously he's a Bears legend. He's coached the Bears on and off for a period of time there. So 2019, 2020, 2021, 22, and 23, he was the coach of the Bears. So, and if the Bears came back in some way, shape, or form, I'm sure he'd be a short price favourite to coach them as well, whether it's the Perth or the Papua New Guinea Bears or whatever it is. But a side point that I had just then while you were talking about not minding the sideline huddle is that one event that occurred a few years prior to this down in Wollongong that counted against the team, and not because the coach was having an address with the players, not because they were getting any advantage out of it, advantage out of what was happening, but it blew up in their face in a very different manner. It involved, I think it was Sean Timmins, Trent Barrett, and Lance Thompson, and Nathan Brown. Slapping. Sorry, there goes my mic. I just hit the mic. So sorry, guys, that might have been quite loud, but. That was something that didn't really get addressed at the time. That, hey, is the coach allowed to do that? That was during the break and play when they were getting pumped by Manly early in the season. I think it was 2003 or 2004. And you're right, like it wasn't a whole team huddle, but it was a mini huddle. He had his leadership group there. He was trying to achieve an effect, and unfortunately, the camera was right there when he brought one or two of them into line. So it could have counted against them. Interesting if the NRL had kind of made a statement there going, well, Nathan Brown shouldn't have been there, and also that's illegal as well. You can only pass messages by a certain way, whether the Jason Taylor one would have got any other attention. But it is what it is. We're splitting hairs here.
Another new coach, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Brown at the time was a new, fresh coach, so
I think he was
getting the better of them.
Younger than at least one or two of those players there. He'd played with them just a year or two before. So, yeah, it's a hard balance to draw, kind of making that jump to first grade coach, and Benji's experiencing that right now for the Tigers. But yeah, as we said, it wasn't a particularly well covered game or well remembered game, but it's the only one that we have won at Homebush against the Rabbitohs. We played 8 times, 7 losses, 1 win. This was that 1 win. Tries to burden Cavell, Cavell 2 from 3, and tries to champion Sutton for the Bunnies, and 1 from 2 for Merritt. The season, we know how it carried on for the Sharks. We finished 3rd and then bowed out in a preliminary final we won't speak any further of, whilst the Bunnies did finish 14th with 8 wins, 16 losses, but still was a pretty ordinary year for them. But give it, 6 years, and they'd be premiers once again. So it's all about building and rebuilding and finding where you're at. For the Sharks, this was one which I suppose would you say was in the premiership window, but wasn't ultimately converted. While for Souths, it was one where you got Merritt and Sutton and the like that carried on, but a lot of other players retired and turned over between then and 2014. Any closing comments from yourself?
No, not really. I think, this was another cog in what was a great season. The early wins, there was a bit of trepidation, should we be excited about this season, or Souths haven't won any games yet? Is it just a punching bag, flat track bully scenario? But as history showed, we went on, we had a bit of mettle, and did really well that season. It was just 2008 was, I don't know if it was a combination of footy or the right age, but it was just a party that whole year. That was a really good season. I think CWSC were in full swing. That was a grand season.
Yeah, it was a fun year. It was a shining light in a pretty dire period. If you took 08's performance out and you just looked at what 05 we snuck into the finals, lost to Dragons. 06 and 07 didn't make the finals. 09, 10, 11 didn't make the finals. So it would have been a pretty dire period. But we had 08 I suppose, which made it maybe the following years all the more difficult, given that it's like, oh, we made a prelim and now we're way back down in the cellar. But anywho, we'll close it up there. If any of you have any memories of this highly unmemorable match, if you remember the Jason Taylor timeout, the strong defence by the Sharks, the tries that Souths just got, whether the 08 team, whether it was a game that we should have been flat track bullies on, and we made hard work of it as well. Maybe that was the case. Whether it was a match that we had the opportunity to play Souths back in the form, but didn't. Thankfully, we got the two. Tell us all about your 2008 memories. Hit the like and subscribe buttons as always. Thanks for your ongoing listenership and interaction. It's been really astounding and lots of fun for us. We will follow up this one with whoever we're playing against next week, round 7, 2024. I believe we're playing the North Queensland Cowboys at home, so we'll be covering a game from 2015 at home in that one, which I'm sure you'll have a lot of fun. That one will be with Chris Kelly, followed by the following week we're playing the Raiders away, and Franko will be back with me to cover a classic match from 2009. Thanks everyone, and we'll close out with a bit of music and say up.
Up.
Get a bit of up Cronulla for you all. Cheers guys. Up. Take care.